The U.S. president is speaking out. Overnight, he said Canada's plan to recognize Palestine would make it very hard to negotiate a trade deal. This afternoon, though, he said it may not be a deal breaker.
International diplomacy is usually a careful dance, but in spring 2025, Canada broke the rhythm. On a brisk Ottawa morning, Prime Minister Mark Carney, with his foreign minister, announced Canada would formally recognize the state of Palestine. This decision followed months of discreet talks with European and Middle Eastern allies, signaling a new, independent Canadian foreign policy. The move shocked Washington, which had long insisted Palestinian statehood could only come from direct negotiations with Israel. Canada, historically aligned with the U.S., now openly challenged American leadership. The Carney government knew the risks. Hostility from the Trump administration was inevitable, but pressed forward, convinced the status quo in the Middle East was unsustainable. The government framed the recognition as a pro-solution stance, not anti-Israel, arguing that recognizing both states was the only path to peace. This act set the stage for a confrontation that would redefine the Canada-US relationship. It was a deliberate pivot, moving Canada out of America's shadow and into a more assertive global role. The Carney-Ford alliance had prepared for this moment, ready for the friction that would follow. The moment of collision had arrived. The White House's response was immediate and furious. President Trump unleashed a barrage of insults and threats on social media, calling Canada's move a betrayal. He accused Carney of being a globalist puppet and threatened devastating tariffs on Canadian goods. All trade negotiations, including USMCA updates, were abruptly frozen. Trump's message Canada had acted in bad faith and would pay a steep economic price. Senior U.S. officials amplified the threats, detailing the pain they'd inflict on Canadian industries. The strategy was classic Trump, shock and awe, designed to create panic and fracture Canadian unity. But this time Canada didn't scramble to de-escalate. The threats only confirmed for Canadian leaders why a more independent path was necessary. Ottawa had anticipated the storm and laid the groundwork to withstand it. The stage was set for a new kind of standoff. Ottawa's response was calm and calculated, steely silence. No panicked press conferences, no public insults. Ministers simply stated Canada's foreign policy is made in Ottawa, not Washington. This refusal to engage in spectacle was a powerful countermove, denying Trump the drama he craved. Behind the scenes, Canadian diplomats rallied support in Europe and Asia, reinforcing Canada's principled stand. At home, officials briefed industry leaders and unions, assuring them of a plan and the importance of national unity. Premier Ford toured Ontario factories, speaking of resilience, while Carney focused on long-term strategy. Canadian news highlighted calm leadership in stark contrast to the chaos in Washington. The silence forced the U.S. to become louder, making their threats look increasingly desperate. Ottawa's discipline was unnerving for the White House. It was political jiu-jitsu, using Trump's aggression against him by refusing to play his game. The Canadian approach became a story in itself. The world watched as Canada stood firm, unshaken. When words failed, the Trump administration escalated to economic warfare. Sweeping tariffs hit Canadian steel, aluminum, and hundreds of other goods, targeting key industries. Canada's public response was understated. A brief statement expressing disappointment and vowing to pursue legal action through the WTO and USMCA. Behind the scenes, Canada rolled out financial support for affected industries, including loan guarantees and market diversification programs. The goal: buffer the shock, prevent mass layoffs, and avoid a tit-for-tat escalation. Canada claimed the moral and legal high ground, winning quiet sympathy from other nations wary of U.S. protectionism. The world saw Canada as a stable, reliable partner amid American unpredictability. Canada's resilience was no accident. It was years in the making. Policymakers anticipating U.S. protectionism developed a national resilience strategy under Carney's leadership. Economic diversification was key. Canadian businesses expanded into Europe and the Indo-Pacific, reducing reliance on the U.S. legal teams prepared detailed challenges for trade disputes, ready to act the moment tariffs hit. National unity was cultivated, with the Carney-Ford alliance bringing together government, industry, and labor. By the time the trade war began, Canadians were united in defending their sovereignty. Industry and labor had been included in planning from the start. The result? A broad consensus to stand firm, frustrating Trump's hopes of exploiting divisions. Canada's shield was built on preparation, unity, and principle. The country was ready for the fight. Trump's strategy relied on spectacle media firestorms, dramatic pronouncements, and public intimidation. But Canada refused to play along, denying him the conflict and sound bites he needed. The world saw a one-sided argument with Trump shouting into a void. The tariffs backfired, raising costs for American manufacturers and consumers, sparking backlash at home. Canada's calm, legal, and economic approach exposed the limits of bluster and intimidation. Substance triumphed over spectacle. The Canadian defense preparation, discipline, and unity proved impenetrable. As months passed, Ottawa's patient strategy outlasted Washington's chaos. The spectacle failed. Canada endured. Beyond economics, the conflict became a defining moment for Canadian identity. For generations, Canada had defined itself in relation to the U.S., but now it asserted itself on its own terms. Recognizing Palestine was a statement of Canadian values, and refusing to back down under pressure became a test of national character. A sense of solidarity swept the country, uniting Canadians across political lines. "We stand with Canada" became a rallying cry. Ford spoke of defending jobs and dignity. Carney championed Canada's right to independent policy. The trade war forged a new consensus. Prosperity could not come at the cost of sovereignty. Canadians showed they'd endure hardship for principle. It was a coming-of-age moment. Canada emerged as a confident, assertive middle power. The trade war accelerated Canada's shift away from dependence on U.S. supply chains. The government launched a Made in Canada strategy, tax incentives, R&D grants, and investments in key sectors like EV batteries and biomanufacturing. Factories in Ontario were retooled, jobs returned, and supply chains shortened. The focus was on innovation and quality, not low-cost competition. This shift revitalized communities and fostered economic optimism. In the U.S., exporters felt the loss as Canada prioritized domestic and global partners. The trade war, meant to punish, instead pushed Canada toward self-reliance. America's attempt at coercion became a long-term strategic loss. The trade conflict ended not with a treaty, but with tariffs quietly lifted as U.S. businesses and courts pushed back. For Canada, this was the start of a new era, one of confidence, self-reliance, and strategic independence. The old dynamic of deference to Washington was gone, replaced by pragmatic partnership. Canada learned it could disagree with the U.S. and withstand the pressure. This emboldened Canada on the world stage, leading on climate, multilateralism, and the rules-based order. The world saw Canada as a significant power, not just America's neighbor. The lesson patient preparation and unity can resist even a superpower's pressure. Canada's victory was won through planning, legal discipline, and national solidarity. The crisis forged a stronger, more self-assured nation. Canada found its voice, not by shouting but by standing firm